Have you ever felt suspicious when someone loved you gently? They remembered your favorite drink. They checked on you without needing anything. They said, "I was thinking about you." And instead of letting it feel good, something inside you tightened. Not because you didn't want love, but because love without a task felt unfamiliar. So your mind started looking for the price. What do I owe them now? How do I keep this? How long before they change their mind? Almost without noticing, you started editing yourself. You replied quickly. You asked for less. You learned to read everyone else's needs before your own. Little by little, you became easier to keep. From the outside, it looked like kindness, patience, maturity. But inside, it felt like a quiet negotiation. A small part of you kept asking, "Have I done enough to stay?" That is where the pattern begins. Not with love, with fear. The fear that if you stop giving, someone will stop choosing you. The fear that if you become honest, you'll become difficult. The fear that your needs aren't something people can love, only tolerate. For many people, this pattern began long before adulthood. Maybe affection came more easily when you were helpful, responsible, calm. The child who never made life harder for anyone else. Children don't learn love from explanations. They learn it from patterns. And slowly, an invisible rule begins to form. Be useful, and you'll be safer. Be easy, and you'll be kept. Be needed, and maybe you won't be left. If love felt uncertain, earning it gave anxiety something to do. You noticed moods before anyone spoke. You solved problems before they became conflict. You shrank yourself before anyone asked you to. Because effort feels safer than helplessness. If love depends on performance, maybe losing it can be prevented. But every survival strategy has a cost. One day you realize you no longer know what love feels like when you're not working for it. A compliment feels like pressure. Help feels like debt. Being needed feels familiar. Being loved feels exposed. Slowly, the coping strategy becomes your identity. You stop saying, "I'm afraid they'll leave." Instead you say, "I just like taking care of people." You stop saying, "I don't know how to receive." Instead you say, "I'm independent." You stop saying, "I'm scared my needs are too much." Instead you quietly convince yourself, "I don't need much." Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's simply the person you had to become, because needing people once felt too dangerous. Without realizing it, you begin measuring your value by what you provide, instead of who you are. Useful feels safer than vulnerable. Giving feels safer than receiving. Performance feels safer than trust. But real love asks something much harder. Not whether you can become easier to keep, but whether you can stay yourself while someone is getting closer. Whether you can receive care without immediately turning it into a debt. That can feel unfamiliar, even unsafe. Because if you've spent years earning your place, being loved without performing can feel like standing completely still in a room where you once survived by constantly moving. Real change rarely begins with a dramatic decision. More often, it begins with something almost invisible. A compliment you don't deflect. A need you don't shrink. A moment of care you don't immediately repay. A pause before apologizing for being human. Not because you suddenly believe you deserve everything, but because you recognize the old rule speaking. Be useful, be easy, be needed. Then you'll finally be safe. And for the first time, you don't obey it right away. Because love that only feels safe when you're performing isn't really peace. It's a contract your nervous system learned to call connection. And maybe the question isn't, "How do I become more lovable?" Maybe the quieter question is, "Who taught me that love had to be earned before it could be trusted?"